James Whitmore lived in a quiet suburb just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. The street he lived on was one of those places that seemed plucked from a lifestyle magazine. Neatly trimmed hedges, pristine driveways, and neighbors who waved but rarely talked beyond weather and trash pickup days. To outsiders, James had everything sorted: an enviable job as a graphic designer, a tastefully decorated townhouse, and a calm, polite demeanor that made him likable in a forgettable sort of way. But what no one saw was that James had been quietly drowning for years. It didn't happen overnight. Depression is clever like that. It doesn't kick down the door or shatter windows. It seeps, it creeps, it slowly replaces joy with numbness, replaces energy with exhaustion, replaces thoughts with whispers. James had always called it the weight, a sensation that pressed into his chest, especially in the morning. It made the act of getting out of bed feel like trying to lift concrete blocks with his ribs. At first, he convinced himself it was just stress. A bad day, then a bad week, then a season. And by the time he realized it wasn't going away, it had already become a part of him. It wasn't until that one stormy Thursday that the weight grew legs. The rain that night hit his windows with a rhythm that matched the thudding of his heart. He had been lying on his side for hours, watching shadows crawl across his bedroom wall. That's when the air changed. Not colder exactly, just heavier. Still, and from the darkest corner of the room, something stepped out. It was tall, thin, cloaked in fabric that moved like smoke but sounded like chains. The figure's face was concealed in a hood, but James didn't need to see it to know what it was. "I am the devil you've been feeding," it said. Its voice was like cracked porcelain and ice water, chilling, delicate, final. James didn't scream. He couldn't. He felt nothing. No panic. No disbelief. Only recognition. The devil didn't rush. It walked slowly, elegantly, until it reached the foot of James's bed and sat, folding its spindly limbs in silence. "You don't remember when I first came, but I do. It was the night you decided not to tell anyone you weren't okay. The night you told yourself that you were weak, that they'd never understand." Its voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The words rang with the truth James had buried under years of polite smiles and late-night scrolling. From that night on, the devil was with him. Sometimes it was silent. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it sat beside him while he showered, making the hot water feel like mist. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't scream in his ear or shake the walls. It didn't need to. "You're a fraud," it would murmur while James brushed his teeth. "Everyone's tired of your sadness. Nothing you do matters." At work, James sat through meetings without hearing a word. His sketches became hollow outlines. Every click of his mouse felt like a nail into wood. He began missing deadlines, then calls, then entire days. The devil started showing up in mirrors, not as a reflection, but in the shadows around his eyes, in the slump of his shoulders, in the way his fingers trembled when opening emails. He stopped creating. He stopped responding to texts. He stopped going to the gym. Then he stopped caring. "You should vanish," the devil said one night while James lay in a pile of unopened mail and unwashed clothes. Not dramatically, just quietly. "Slip away, like you were never here." And James didn't argue. He imagined it sometimes, not violently, not with drama, just disappearing, stopping, fading, and then a voicemail. "Hey man, it's Mike. Haven't seen you in a while. Want to grab coffee sometime this week? No pressure. Just miss you." Michael, his college roommate, one of the few people who ever really knew James before the wait. The message was casual, breezy even, but it shattered the silence in a way nothing else had. James replayed it once, twice, 5 times. And for the first time in weeks, he moved. It was awkward, jerky, robotic. He stumbled to the window and pulled open the curtains. Sunlight stabbed into his skull. He blinked rapidly. The devil recoiled. James turned on the shower. He shaved, brushed his teeth. His hands shook as he dressed. His mouth felt dry, but he left the house. The cafe was noisy, too bright, but when Michael saw him, his eyes softened, not with pity, but with relief. And James sat down. "I'm not okay," he said quietly, not looking up. "That's okay," Michael replied. "You're not alone." That night, James Googled therapists. He found a practice nearby, booked an appointment. Half of him expected to cancel it, but he didn't. He showed up, sat on a couch across from a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Alden, and when she asked why he was there, he didn't answer. He cried. Not sobbing, just a steady leak, like his body couldn't hold it in anymore. In the weeks that followed, James learned what the devil really was. A shape given to something clinical. Major depressive disorder. Not a flaw, not weakness, not laziness. An illness. And illnesses could be treated. It didn't vanish, the devil still whispered. Therapy wasn't magic. Medication wasn't instant. But now James had names, labels, armor. Each session chipped away at the devil's form. Every conversation with Michael, every return call to his sister, every meal cooked instead of ordered, another crack in the facade. "You're still broken," the devil hissed after a tough therapy session. "No," James whispered back. "I'm healing." There were setbacks. Of course there were. Depression doesn't leave without a fight. There were days James couldn't get out of bed. Days he sat in the shower until the water ran cold. Days where food had no taste, where voices sounded far away. But there were also victories. A walk in the park where the sunlight felt real again. A sketch that made him proud. A conversation with a stranger that didn't feel forced. He began working on something new. A graphic novel about a man haunted by a cloaked figure that lived in his house. He called it The Devil Within. It became his therapy, his mirror, his exorcism. When it was done, he shared it online, anonymously at first. The response was overwhelming. "Oh, this is me. I thought I was the only one who saw it this way." You put into words what I've never been able to say. And for the first time in years, James felt purpose. Not performance, not pressure. Purpose. He revealed his name. He began speaking at local schools, at art clubs, youth centers, telling his story not as a cure, but as a map. He told them, the devil doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in your own voice. But you're not alone. It lies. That's what it does best. Years passed. James's life didn't become perfect. The devil still visited, especially in the winter, on lonely nights, after bad days. But now when it came, James knew what to do. He opened the window, turned on music, called Michael, picked up his sketchbook. He spoke the devil's name, and the devil had less power. Because depression, like all devils, thrives in silence. But when you speak, when you ask for help, when you tell your story, it loses its grip. James didn't defeat the devil. He lived. And sometimes that's everything. Story 2. People always described Hannah more as nice or quiet, the kind of person you could trust to water your plants or return your umbrella. In high school, she was the girl who sat at the back of the room, drawing in the margins of her notebook, never raising her hand unless called upon. In college, she became a ghost in crowded lecture halls, always early, always seated near the exit. What no one saw was the devil sitting beside her. It wasn't a beast of fire and claws. No, this devil wore no horns. It didn't roar. It was elegant, whisper thin, clad in a suit of cobwebs and velvet silence. It smelled like dust and tension. It moved without sound, but spoke in thunder inside her head. Don't say that. They'll think you're weird. You'll stutter again, like always. Everyone's watching. Everyone's judging. Hannah first met the devil when she was 8 years old. It stood beside her at the front of the class during show and tell. Her voice cracked and someone giggled. That was all it needed. The devil stepped in then, its fingers wrapping around her throat, pressing gently. Not enough to strangle, just enough to remind her who was boss. From that day on, the devil walked with her everywhere. It sat at her desk during job interviews. It stood behind her during group projects. It curled up in her chest before parties and whispered in her ear at grocery stores. It even followed her into the bathroom stalls, where she'd hide with fake phone calls and shallow breathing. Every attempt at conversation became a battlefield. Smiling too much? You look fake. Saying too little? You're boring. Voice shaking? You sound like a child. Sometimes Hannah imagined the devil resting its chin on her shoulder, watching the world with her eyes but muttering cruel translations for every human interaction. A friend saying, "You should come out tonight," became, "They only invited you out of pity." A coworker laughing became, "They're mocking your posture." An accidental eye contact on the subway? "You're being stared at because you look ridiculous." Hannah learned to avoid. She declined invites with polite excuses. She walked with her head down. She over-prepared every sentence she spoke in public. She answered the phone only when it stopped ringing. In group settings, she smiled too much and said too little. At home, she replayed every word she'd spoken, flinching at the memory of saying, "You too," to a barista who said, "Enjoy your coffee." The devil would laugh. "They think you're stupid." And yet, Hannah functioned. She held a job in digital marketing, worked remotely, and had 2 friends she trusted. But inside, every day was a tightrope walk. Every morning, she layered herself in invisible armor before facing the world. Until one day she broke. It happened at a small meeting. 6 people, coffee, casual brainstorming. The devil had spent the entire morning perched on her shoulders, weighing down her tongue. Her hands were clammy, her stomach churned. Then someone asked, "Hannah, what's your take?" The room turned to her, and she froze. Not a long pause, not hesitation, a full body shutdown. Her brain screamed, her throat closed, her mouth opened, then shut. She mumbled something incoherent and looked down, heart pounding. Her chest was a drum, her ears were sirens. No one laughed, but the devil did. They'll never ask again. She left early that day. She cried on the bus. She felt ashamed, exposed, like a wound turned outward. And that night she wrote a letter, not to herself, not to anyone she planned to send it to. She wrote it to the devil. "You do not protect me," she wrote. "You do not keep me safe. You are not my voice. You are fear wearing silk." It wasn't a scream. It was a whisper. But it was the first time she ever spoke to it, not for it. And the devil stirred. Hannah found a therapist who specialized in anxiety. The first session, she nearly turned back. The devil paced in the waiting room with her, muttering, "You won't know what to say." But she sat down and talked, barely above a whisper, voice trembling. But she talked about the fear, about the freeze, about the exhaustion of pretending she was fine. And the devil, still present, began to lose its shape. She learned its name, social anxiety disorder, and that name mattered. It made it smaller, explainable, treatable. It didn't vanish, not yet, but the devil became visible now. She could spot it when it crept in, before a phone call, before an introduction. She began speaking up in meetings, just 1 sentence, then 2. She practiced deep breaths before entering the cafe. She even answered the phone sometimes. The devil screamed louder now, sensing it was losing control. "You're embarrassing yourself." But now she answered, "So what if I am?" She joined a small support group. Other people spoke about their own devils. They laughed, they understood. And suddenly Hannah wasn't alone. Years passed. She never became a social butterfly. She didn't need to, but she stopped hiding. She spoke without rehearsing. She smiled because she wanted to, not because she had to. The devil still followed her sometimes, especially in crowds, but it no longer sat on her shoulders. It lingered in the distance, whispering now and then. But Hannah had learned something important. You don't have to kill your devils. You just have to stop obeying them. Story 3. There is something unholy about 3:47 a.m. It's not the time itself. It's what it becomes to those who cannot sleep. A chasm. A void between days where time stretches and the soul shrinks. And for Elliot Hayes, 3:47 a.m. had become a sacred appointment. Not with God, not with sleep, but with the devil. He hadn't always been this way. There had been a time in some faded version of his 20s when Elliot would fall asleep mid-conversation, mid-movie, mid-page. But that life felt like a myth now. Like a story someone else had told him about someone else's body. Now sleep was a gate sealed shut. The more he reached for it, the further it withdrew. And somewhere along the line, he didn't know when, the devil found the crack in his night and slipped through. It wasn't red. It didn't wear horns. This devil was refined, sleek. Its voice wasn't a growl, but a breath against the neck. It never needed to shout. Still awake, Elliot? A whisper. Always a whisper. Always from the darkest corner of the room. The devil arrived slowly at first. Nights where Elliot stayed up watching conspiracy documentaries or falling into YouTube rabbit holes. The occasional stretch of insomnia that he brushed off as stress. But stress came and went. This thing stayed. He tried everything. Valerian root, lavender tea, weighted blankets, breath work, sleep podcasts narrated by people with gentle European accents. None of it worked, because the devil didn't live in his body, it lived in his mind. In the first few weeks, the sleeplessness was annoying. In the first few months, it became despair. By the second year, it was identity. Elliot's room stopped being a place of rest and became a cage. He rearranged the furniture, changed the mattress, bought blackout curtains. All it did was give the devil more shadows to slip between. At night, he would lie still, counting the cracks in the ceiling. Some nights he would do mental math, reciting times tables backwards. Others, he'd make deals. If I fall asleep by 2:30, I won't complain tomorrow. If I fall asleep by 3 o'clock, I'll eat healthy. If I fall asleep by 4 o'clock, but he never did. 3:47 became the devil's hour. Elliot would stare at the clock, and the clock would stare back, digital red, always unforgiving. And the devil would begin its slow walk from the closet. How many nights has it been now? It asked once, voice made of rust and regret. How long before they all see the cracks? He didn't answer. Not at first, he never did. The devil never needed permission to enter. It sat at the foot of the bed like a judge waiting for confession. And Elliot, he was always guilty. Your coworkers notice. The bags, the yawns, the glassy stare. They pity you, Elliot. You're unraveling. There was a time when he thought maybe it was all in his head. That insomnia was just poor sleep hygiene and too much caffeine. But this wasn't about sleep anymore. It was about the ritual of not sleeping, the mental loops, the guilt, the endless, self-consuming fear that sleep had abandoned him for good. He tried to distract himself. Endless scrolling, obsessive list-making, rearranging his spice rack alphabetically. But none of it worked for long. The devil always returned. He began seeing it in the corners of things, in the pitch-black reflection of his blank laptop screen, in the half-seen shape that moved in the mirror behind him. A tall, thin silhouette with a mouth that never smiled and eyes that never blinked. You look worse every day. People are starting to talk. You are becoming a shadow of yourself. The worst part? Elliot believed it. He stopped taking pictures. He turned down invitations. He canceled dates with vague texts like, just tired. But he wasn't tired. He was beyond tired. He was threadbare. He was a man unraveling from the inside out. He spoke less at work, forgot simple words, sent emails to the wrong clients. One day he forgot how to spell calendar. Another day he cried in the office bathroom for 23 minutes because someone said, "You look tired," in a tone that wasn't even unkind. He was trapped in a nightmare without sleep. Until one night something snapped. It was 3:47 a.m. again. The devil was already there, lounging in the chair in the corner. But this time, Elliot didn't look away. He stared directly at it. He whispered, "What do you want from me?" The devil's smile spread slowly. Its teeth were too small, too many. "I want you to believe this is forever." He closed his eyes. He pressed his palms into them until the darkness was purple and throbbing. And then, somewhere in that pain, something shifted. Elliot got up. He walked into the living room, turned on his laptop and typed, "I can't sleep. I think I'm losing my mind. He didn't expect a cure. He didn't even expect comfort. But the moment he hit send to a sleep disorder forum, it was like opening a window in a sealed room. People responded. Strangers, sure, but kind ones. They shared stories of melatonin battles and late-night demons. They talked about therapy, medication, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI. They said words Elliot hadn't dared to hope for. You're not crazy. This gets better. The devil lies. He cried then, not in a loud movie scene way, quietly, tears that barely moved as though his body had forgotten how to even break down properly. He made a decision. He booked a sleep specialist appointment. The devil laughed. Of course it did. You think naming me changes anything? It asked, amused. But something had changed, because the next day Elliot kept the appointment. The specialist didn't give him magic. He gave him science, a routine, a plan. No screens after 9, bed only for sleeping. Wake up at the same time no matter what. Journaling, evening walks, small tools, but they felt like weapons. He also began therapy, real therapy, not just advice columns. He told the therapist everything: the voice, the 347 curse, the shame, the self-blame, the belief that maybe he was broken beyond repair. Bo, the therapist, didn't flinch. You're not broken, she said. You're scared, and scared people don't sleep well. Let's help you feel safe again. The devil fought back, hard. The first few nights of the new routine were brutal, worse than usual. Sleep didn't come. The devil screamed, clawed, rattled the window of his mind. But Elliot didn't give in. He started meditating, not for peace, but for practice, to learn how to watch the devil without letting it in. He wrote letters to his insomnia, then tore them up. He began whispering back when the devil hissed its curses. You're not real, he would say. You're fear with a name. Some nights he still didn't sleep, but some nights he did. And slowly, the hour of 347 stopped feeling like a curse. It became a checkpoint, a reminder that he was still fighting. And eventually, he slept 6 hours, then 6.5, then 7. The devil didn't vanish. Devils don't vanish, but it grew smaller, its voice weaker, its shape more transparent. And now when it returned, Elliot would say, not tonight, because he had built something stronger than silence. He had built a life that wasn't controlled by the 4th hour. And when people asked him now, how'd you finally sleep again? He smiled and said, I stopped letting the devil decide when my day ends.